Fourth grade, Unit 2. Now that you have developed a solid base of understanding of equivalent fractions and comparing fractions, it's time to operate. We'll do the major work of adding and subtracting, the major work of multiplying, and the supporting work of adding and subtracting fractions on line plots. So why are we doing this in Unit 2? Well, it's accessible because we just finished Unit 1 where we developed basic fraction understandings. We can apply and extend them now as we operate with fractions. But why did we do fractions in Units 1 and 2 at all? We want to do fractions early because they're major work. When we did them later in the year, they often got rushed, de-emphasized, deprioritized, and they're way too important for that. We also hope to dispel the notion that fractions are hard. Fractions are numbers. Fractions can be modeled. Fractions don't have to be scary if we don't make them that way. So let's dive into topic A. Please continue to emphasize concrete and visual models. Start with concrete. If you don't have manipulatives, see if you can borrow them from another teacher, or at the very least, print them off and cut them out so students can actually join and separate the pieces of the fractions. Then you'll move into visual models, like area models, and don't forget to do number lines. They're a key representation when adding and subtracting fractions. I want you to think about this topic potentially as being flexible. You might add fractions and then subtract, or maybe you'll add and subtract at the same time. You might work with fractions and then mix numbers, or maybe you'll do those at the same time. Different programs have taken a different approach, and there's pros and cons to both. We laid out an order in the pacing guide that we think will help you. This is also an order that aligns very closely with Envision if you have it. But you basically have from days 2 through 9 to really tackle adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. Try to find connections between the standards. So although in our pacing guide, we assign a specific day to a specific standard, that doesn't mean that other standards can't be reinforced as well. Up here, this equation represents fraction addition, B3A. It also represents fraction decomposition, B3B. Find ways to make connections. Continue to use representations throughout the unit. When you're comparing mixed numbers with fractions greater than 1, don't find yourself just using a procedure. 3 times 3 plus 2 equals 11 thirds. That doesn't make sense if we don't connect it to a visual. Visuals prove there are 11 thirds in 3 2/3. Lastly, I just want to remind you again that the line plot standard is a supporting standard. If you're out of time, you might de-emphasize those days. I'm not saying skip them, but if you're truly falling behind, you can, because they're not the most important. And when you're teaching them, look for ways to reinforce addition and subtraction. As we move into topic B, multiplication, the key recommendation is to incorporate word problems throughout. Although we give you 2 specific days for word problems at the end of the topic, they should be done throughout. You want students to know when and why they multiply fractions, starting on day 15. I want to highlight some language from the standards. 4NFB4 says, apply and extend previous understandings of multiplication to multiply a fraction by a whole number. What this means is we don't want students to think about fractions as totally different from whole numbers. Fraction multiplication is just an extension of whole number multiplication. It's equal groups of things. It's repeated addition. In 4th grade, the standard says you multiply a fraction by a whole number. It's a little confusing the way it's written, but what that means is whole number times fraction. Students don't do fractions times whole numbers or fractions times fractions until 5th grade. This makes it really easy for you because it's really repeated addition, a whole number of groups of a fraction. Let's end with some logistics. This unit is in volume 2 of your textbook. When you finished unit 1 and you took the post-test, you maybe saw some areas that students needed support. You can support and incorporate that now. And at the end of this unit, you may see areas that students need additional support on addition and subtraction. You can do that in unit 3 when you add and subtract with denominators of 10 and 100.